Today we're going to be making this pendant together. There is going to be some creative freedom in your designs. I'm just going to be giving you the basics, and anything you want to change, you totally can. But here is what we are working towards. Okay, so for the first part of this video, we're going to go over how to make a fairly simple, straightforward frame, since we're only going to be setting one stone in it. I am using an obviously oval stone. I would recommend using this shape for first starting out. It's a little bit easier to pin than, say, a circle or any other shape. Teardrops are pretty easy too, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to use an oval. I'm not going to give you guys exact measurements on things. It's really important that you learn how to adapt and use what you have. So I'm just going to show you the process of doing this with the stone that I have, and then you can adapt it to what you have. So, which is really easy to do. You'll see that it's going to make sense, I promise you. The first thing that we're going to need is some 18 gauge square wire. That's pretty non-negotiable for this. You could use 16 if you were so inclined and had a larger stone, but my stone is pretty small, so we're going to use that. And then what's going to happen first is we're going to kind of measure out how long we're going to need this wire. Okay, so I'm leaving a tail here about the size of the stone here. That's going to end up being our bail. So there's 1, 2, right? So now the side of our stone is going to be able to be covered. And then we need to give it the space for the bottom. So I'm twisting it so that it's giving us the extra length in between these two lines for the base of the stone. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3 stone lengths plus a little bit. And then we need one more for the other side of the bail. And then we're going to clip it. I'm going to still give it even a little bit extra, just because it never hurts to have too much wire. You can always clip it and reuse it for projects in the future. However, not enough wire, you're going to have to scrap and restart. So it's always better to have a little bit more than not enough. So our next step is going to be to take our stone and set it in the center of the wire that we just clipped, and shape the wire around it, because that's going to be the shape that we need it to be, right? So when you let go, you're going to notice that it causes this little gap on the side of the stone and in between the wire, which is exactly what you want, okay? You don't want it to be too tight, because next we're going to go in with some 20 gauge square wire, and we're going to put cross wires in the back to hold the stone from falling out the back, okay? So we'll clip 1 and 2, making sure that it's long enough to reach all the way across and to wrap over and give it a quick little wrap, okay? So we're still going to make sure that we're keeping this with a bit of a gap so that the wire, when we wrap it on itself, it's going to be able to still fit our stone, okay? So the first one's going to go toward the bottom, okay? Because the center of the stone is going to be able to kind of hold itself a little bit better. If you put them both in the middle, then the base and the top of the stone are going to pop out, right? But if you secure the bottom and the top of the stone, then it's not going to go anywhere, okay? I'm giving it one solid wrap and clipping it closer to the top. And then I'm going to pin it down, okay? Really important to make sure that this is nice and secure. That's why I give it more than one wrap, but using the square 20 gauge wire, it's going to want to sit, okay? Also important to make sure that you're clipping your wire so that it's still inside your frame. You don't want it on the outside out here, and you don't want it sticking out the back, because then it's going to be a poking, snagging hazard, and nobody wants that in their jewelry. Okay, I've wrapped it, clipped it, and I've pinned it down. I'm going to make sure that my stone still fits in between these two wires, and it does beautifully, which is great. You see how it has a little bit of a gap there. And the base of my stone is not going to be able to slide through once I have this other one, and we have our wires over the top. Okay, so then you do the same thing toward the top of the stone. I keep the stone in place while I figure out where that's going to be. That's going to be right there for me. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to wrap it twice to make sure that it stays. We're going to clip it toward the top so that when we pin it down, it's not sticking out the back or on the side. And then we're going to pinch these like this because mine kind of created a bit of a gap there. And not that it's going to be super detrimental or problematic. I just don't like it, and I want it to look nice. Because even though you're not going to see it regularly, people will still see the back of the piece. So it's good to keep it as clean as possible. And I feel like I just wrapped that a little too tight. Let's check. Make sure my stone still fits. It does. Could actually be a little bit tighter. And then I'm going to give it a good wrap. Make sure that I didn't overwrap that because that would be hilarious. I'm like, oh yeah, there's plenty of space, and then I make it too tight and then I have to cut it. Okay, so now I clipped. Everything fits. Pinning it down so that it stays nice and tight because we don't want it to come loose. Quadruple checking that we're all good before we move on to the next step, because if you don't, then you'll have problems. Okay, so now I have pinched them kind of pointing together a little bit, and then I'm going to pull it like that. Okay, so my wires have dipped in a little bit to basically the width of the top of the stone, and then gone back to a parallel, which is for making the bail portion of this. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold where the bend is, and I'm going to take the pliers and I'm going to circle that around. Okay, so now we have this shape. We're going to pinch it a little bit tighter so that we can bend this over so that it hooks the front of the frame, because otherwise you're not going to have a secure bail. Okay, you want that to be nice and secure. It's okay if this doesn't wrap all the way around. The more of a wrap you can get, obviously, the more secure it will be, but we're going to be adding things and cross wires and things to make sure that it doesn't move, so it's not too big of an issue if it doesn't. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing, and we're wrapping, sorry, I didn't really mention this, we're wrapping it so that the wire comes around the outside so that the tail points in. You see what I'm saying? Again, that's to avoid snagging and little stabby bits, because nobody wants that on their jewelry. Say that a lot because it is very important, and I need to remind myself as well, so bear with me if it is repetitive or whatever, I guess, word you could use, annoying. Then again, we're bending this wire so that it hooks around in the front, making sure that the bail tops are level. It's okay if they're a little bit different size on the back. You're still going to be able to, as long as you can still fit a stone through it, or not stone, sorry, chain through it. It'd be really weird if you were trying to fit a stone through it. If you're making your own chain for this, usually the bail, not the bail, the clasp is going to be a little bit larger, so I would recommend putting the chain through and then attaching the clasp to your homemade chain just so that it fits. Okay, now back to our regularly scheduled program. Now we've got our stone, it fits. We've got the makings of a bail, it also fits. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple more cross bars just to keep our bail from being able to splay out and to attach wires to. So our first 2 wires that we attached go across the back side of the stone so that it can kind of fall down and into a groove. And we have the outside of our frame, let me show you what I'm talking about. We have our outside of our frame here, and the bar goes across the back so that our stone can fit down in the center and it holds the stone in place. For these next few wires, we're going to do the opposite, and we're going to have it on the top and outside, well, on the back it's going to be the same where it's on the back outside, but it's the top side of the wire. Because then we can attach the wires that we need to attach for our pressure fitting and design work on the pendant. Again, we're going to make sure that this wrap, we get the tail end of it inside the pendant, just to, you guessed it, avoid snagging, stabbing bits. And pinch it down. And then do the same on the other side. We're going to grab our stone really quick and make sure that we are staying above the top of it. We don't want it to make it so that our stone can't fit. And we're going to wrap that around, clip it so that we can pin it inside. And that's great. As you're going, you're going to notice your wires kind of getting wobbly and sliding out of the shape that you want them to be in. That's fine, just bend them back and keep going. There's no need to panic. You could totally crush this thing and then reposition it if you really wanted to. Try not to do that too many times because that will work harden your wrap and you'll end up not being able to do that anymore. Okay, so we've got the one on the front. Now we're doing the same thing on the back side of the bail, because this is the wire that we're going to secure to make sure that we cover our bail so we don't just have a big empty ugly space where the wire lives. Okay. I did. Sorry, hang on one second. I just attached it the wrong direction. I'm going to clip this little loop that I added because it is all marred from removing. And then we're going to reattach, making sure that the wire is on the outside, not the inside of the bail. And this one, the one that's in the bail is a little bit trickier as far as how you want that tail to sit. Before, you could do a wrap and it could be kind of anywhere so long as it's on the inside of the piece. But here, if you have the tail sticking up and into the bail itself, your chain is going to snag on it. So when I'm doing this part, I will clip it so that it's flush with the rest of itself. You can kind of see what I'm talking about right there, how it's clipped flush just to make a simple little loop. And then pin that down so that it doesn't slide. Because you're using square wire, it's a little bit easier to make sure that it's not going to slide. Round wire really likes to slide around a little bit more just because it doesn't have the grooves and edges for it to hold on to. So now I've gone across the back and I have clipped my wire, and I'm going to pin it the same way that I did my first wire. Let's see how I can use these pliers to effectively pinch that down. There we go. It's important to be patient when bending and attaching your wires, because if you're going fast, these tips and edges of your pliers can mar the work. I can show you what I mean by that on this little piece of wire here. So you see how it's nice and smooth. If I pinch it too hard, it can kind of cut the wire. You can see that there. And that makes it like snaggy and sharp. And there's no real way to get rid of that once you've done it, other than to clip it off and do it again. So taking your time and being slow and thoughtful about how you're pushing your wire, how you're attaching things, and how hard you're pinching them is very important. Okay, so now we have a very basic frame. From here, you can do a lot with this frame. You can add channel sets, you can add any kind of weave that you want. You could leave all your wires bare and straight if you wanted to. It's really up to you at this point. And so for the rest of this video, we're going to go into attaching our decorative wires and pinning this down with what's called a pressure fitting, which is one of the most common things that we do in wire wrapping with frames. Okay, so to start with this, I'm going to try to keep this super simple for everyone. Like I said, you can really, the sky is truly the limit with this design. You can change anything you want for something that you think would look nicer. If you would rather do like a coiled coil or a channel setting, as I've said, or different weave, or whatever kind of design you really enjoy doing or like the look of, feel free to do it here. I do have a tutorial on how to do different weaves elsewhere in my videos, but for right now, like I said, I'm gonna keep this really simple. So for the first section, I'm going to just do 2 bare wires for the inside part. I like doing that just because it feels clean to me and it looks nice up against the stone and doesn't distract from it, in my mind. Whatever you prefer, you can do here, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to keep it simple. So for the first part, because as I've said, we're all doing different stones, we're going to take our first wire and we're going to kind of run it along the edge of the stone and see how long it's going to need to be to connect to this cross bead wire that we put over the top of the stone and attach to the bottom of the frame with a little bit of a bend. So I'm going to say about right here. It's always better to have more than not enough, especially when we're using copper wire. It's just fine. We can always use our scraps for other things. Hopefully you have a fancy little box or Ziploc bag or whatever to hold your scraps into. Okay, so I'm going to move my stone out of the way for this very first step. It's going to come back very soon, but I just want to have full use of my fingers and the stone. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the first wire to this upper frame. When I'm doing this, I'm going to make sure that it is, because I'm doing the bottom one closest to me, I'm going to wrap towards myself so that the wire that it needs to go next to doesn't have a gap from that little wrap, okay? So it's going to look like this. See how it's wrapping toward the outside of the frame, not towards the center? That's exactly what you want to do here. And then pin it down. Pinch them together. And call that one good. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing with the wire next to it. Again, we're going to make a little hook. And we're going to attach it wrapping toward the outside of the frame, not toward the center, just so that our wires don't end up with a little gap in between them. Pinching everything together, keeping it nice and straight. And now you've got these 2 wires. So we're going to slide them into place. Hopefully you didn't pin anything too tightly when you were just getting your wires attached. So get them into place and slide this into the most center point that you can. It's okay if it's a little bit off. Wires are very good at moving. And pin it more tightly so that it stays where you want it to stay. Okay? So now we've got this happening. Okay, now it's time to bring our stone back. These are going to be our first pieces to hold it. Then we're going to take these wires and give them a little bit of a curve to go along the outer edge of our stone and then back into the middle of the base. Okay, so the first one's going to look kind of like that once it's ready, and then do the same thing on the other side, curving along the stone, still making sure it's on the face of the stone, not down at one of the bottom parts of the stone. You want to make sure that it's holding the stone down. If you end up going and sliding off the edge, it's not going to secure the stone. So now at the base, you look like this on the top. And if it's not exactly the way you want it, you can always just slide them a little bit, get them to be where you want. Bend these wires down around the bottom, pinning them on the top as much as you can. Then flip it over, still pinching, still sliding. And then you're going to use your pliers and slide that wire into the crack between the frame and your stone. Okay, so it's going to be like that. Okay, you're going to want to pinch it down. Remember being gentle with how hard you're pushing so that you don't mar the wire, and then do the same thing with this wire on the other side and pinch it down and in as much as you can, and it's going to come out the top, and that's okay because we're going to go in and we're going to make sure that these don't wiggle, and we're going to go in and clip our tail. Okay, and then you're going to do the same thing if necessary on the other side. It's not necessary on mine. And now our stone is secure in between these wires. It's not going to go anywhere. While I've been working on this, I have noticed that I missed something pretty crucial in my bail. So I'm going to clip one more piece of my 20 gauge wire. It doesn't need to be long. I'm going to make a little hook, and I'm going to put it straight across the top of my bail. So right there. This is because we're going to connect the wires for the design to this back piece, and when it goes up and over the top of the bail, without this wire here, they're just going to fall into the bail. So this is going to hold them up and out of the bail. So it's a very important piece, and if you don't remember to put it there, then you're going to end up being really frustrated while you're working on this later. So we're going to attach that now. Making sure that, again, we're keeping the wires away from anywhere where the skin could touch or the chain could touch. These ones can actually be done up on the top because we're going to have wires that are going to go over the top. Okay, so now our piece is looking like this, which is great. And then the next step is deciding what you want to add next. I really like a fern weave, and so I'm going to do 2 of those. But to start, I will measure out a piece. It's going to need to go all the way to the back, up and over, all the way to the front, and then be able to attach. So a good guesstimate is about this long. I'm going to do 3 of my base wires. I'm using 22 gauge square, and then I'm going to use a 30 gauge round wire for weaving. So the first thing that I'm going to do is flatten these out and straighten them out as much as possible so that they're easy to work with. And then grab my first wire, give it some wraps. This part you can kind of determine your own pattern for. These initial wraps are going to determine the distance in between your ferns. So if you want them to be closer together, you will do fewer wraps. If you want them a little bit further apart, you will do more. I'm doing, let's count. I didn't count while I was doing it. 8. We'll do 9 because I like that number. So I've got 9 wraps on my base, and then I will connect or grab my next wire up, wrap the 2 together once, grab my next wire up, making sure that my tips are all lined up. This one gets the top 2 wires wrapped together. Oops, I'm a little crooked here, so I don't know what I'm wrapping together. This is why it's important to make sure your wires are nice and straight, so that you can keep them nice and straight while wrapping. And I am failing miserably at that today, apparently. That's my middle wire. Okay, let's see, what am I doing here? Let's put this, let's bend it that way a little bit. Okay. Now maybe I can do this properly. That's my bottom wire. So now I have a 1 wrap on my bottom 2 wires together, and then 1 wrap on my top 2 together, and then I will do 1 wrap on my bottom 2 together again, and then I will do my 9 wraps on my bottom most wire. I'm going to kind of curve these apart a little bit better. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, slide those close, and then do my 2 bottom, 2 top, 2 bottom, all bottom, 1 bottom. If you need more detailed description of how to do this, it's in my weaves tutorial video. For now, I'm going to speed this up a bit. Okay, so now we have the length that we need to cover from the bottom of the stone and frame all the way up and over the bale. So we will clip our weaving wire off, and we will start attaching our work. So I'm going to start at the top and kind of make sure that actually I'll start at the bottom, sure. Lining up our work with the wire that's already in place and bending it down and around. And then we're going to pin these wires in place so that they don't slide while we're trying to pin the rest of the piece. So we'll do that right now. We'll hook these in, and they're hooked like, sorry, made this into a bit of a hook and then hooked it like this. It's the easiest way for me. If there's something that works better for you, go ahead and do that. If you don't have a method that you've done before, just do what I just did and hopefully that helps. So this doesn't need to be tight. It doesn't need to not wiggle or anything like that. It's fine because we don't have it exactly where we want it to be yet. Okay. So the next step is going to be running it along the outer edge of the wire that we already have in place, like this, okay? So you're going to want to pinch that wire that you have in place down so that you're not pushing it around. And then shape this to go over the bail while also still following that wire in the middle and making sure that you have enough space, because we are going to double this over onto this side, bend it down and around so that it's lining up with this back wire that you have. And then you can clip your ends. I usually make them a little bit longer so that we have space to work. And then start to hook them around that bottom wire that you have, keeping in mind that these wires will be in with your chain, so try to keep them flush against the wires in the back, like so. You can see that nobody's sticking up, nobody's pointing around, and now this is nice and attached along the entire edge, and you're going to want to double that piece. So now that we have our second weave of the same length as the first one, so the way that I made sure that they were even was I counted how many of the little ferns this one had and did the same thing on this side. So this one had 15, so this one's going to have 15 as well. Yours may have more, may have less, depending on, well, how many wraps are in between each fern, how big your stone is, all sorts of things. But just count how many one has and then do the same thing on the other. And now we're going to attach this one to the frame as well. We're going to clip these ends a little bit because they don't need to be that long. Oh, another important thing is to remember which side is up on your fern weave, because, or whatever weave you're doing, because they do look slightly different. This is my up, so I'm going to make my hook like I did last time. Throw the weave across my table, because that's helpful. And then I'm going to do all the same steps as the other side. So hook it in, pinch those wires into a circle so that they actually stay put, and then start lining it up along the frame wire that you put over your stone in the first place. Up and over the bail. So I'm having a little bit of a problem right here. I'm going to show you what's going on so that if you have this issue, you can fix it as well. What's happening is this won't line up as flush as I want it to be with this center wire, and the problem is the connection from the initial wire. You can see that the tail end of it is coming up along the side of the wire, and it's making it so that the new weave can't go all the way against it. So what we're going to do is we're going to clip it flush, minding the other wire, not clipping it as well, or our frame, and then we're going to pinch all the way across to the other frame, the other weave, just a little bit, so that we can make sure that we slide that piece underneath. And now we should be able to pinch our new weave flush with our wire. You can see the difference there now. So now we have it going along the edge, it's going up and over the frame. So now the last step, as I'm sure you guessed it, is to connect it to this back wire, just like on the other side. Clip it, and then pin them into place, just like we did with the last wire. Making sure that we're keeping it tight against it themselves so that our chain or our bail doesn't have any snags on the inside for our chain. So now we've got this. Okay, so with this, we're pretty close to having it done. Our stone is secure, it's not going to go anywhere, but we can still see some of this frame on the outside, which doesn't look very nice. Here you can choose what you would like to do. You can put a coiled coil, you can put whatever you want, whatever makes you happy and you think looks nice. I'm going to make a larger coil, but it's just simple coil. So I'm going to use half round wire just so that there's a difference in my wrappings. And again, using my 22 gauge because it's just fitting nicely. Okay, we're gonna measure it out, make sure it'll fit, clip it, and then I'm using a 24 gauge half round wire, so it's a little bit smaller than the base wire so that it actually will wrap around it instead of just warping the center wire. I just wanted to have some dimension and difference from the 30 gauge wire that we already have quite a bit of from our fern weave, or whatever you chose to do there, and make this kind of larger just so that it hopefully covers the entirety of the frame in the back there. So I'm just going to wrap this around. Make sure you're pinching it down as you go. Well, sliding it back, not pinching it down. Just so that it's nice and tight and isn't leaving any gaps and looks nice. And then just keep it going. Until you reach the length that you need to fill the space. Okay, so this is going to be, let's see, the edge. Okay, good. All the way around down to the base. Good. Alright, that's going to be long enough for what we need. And now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to attach this one yet. I need it to have a friend first. Excellent. Now that we have a friend for our coil, we can attach them. The reason that I don't like to attach my coils first, like I do my weaves, is because I don't want to have to count individual wraps. So I just leave it off to the side, and so that I can just compare them to each other instead of counting every wrap in my head as I go. I'd rather just be like, oh, that looks close, and then put them next to each other, see if it is or not, and then go from there. If you would prefer to count, go be my guest. I will only slightly judge you. So now we've got our two coils. We can attach them. So the first one that I'm going to do is this little one. I'm going to make my hook. And we're getting a little tight back here on this wire, which is fine, but it's just that you'll have to pay a little bit more attention while you're doing this attachment. Again, keeping it flush with the wire that has the coil on it that's going into the front, so that it is not going to snag your chain. Okay, so now pin this as you go next to the wire that you have. Okay, so, and then you're just going to shape it around the weave that you have and bring it down to the bottom where you can connect it to your frame. Just line it up with the others. So, flip your tail and bend it and pin it in between the stone and the frame, just like you've been doing this whole time, and attached. Okay, so now we've got this on this outer side. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a gap happening here. That's pretty easy to fix. Just take the side of your pliers and you can bend it into shape a little bit better there. Okay, perfect. Okay, do the same thing on the other side now. Give ourselves a little hook, ouch, maybe a little puncture wound. It's all par for the course with wire wrapping. And hook it on that back wire. Pinch it into place. Bend it over. Oops. So, when I'm bending mine over, I am seeing that I attached it in the wrong spot. I need to have it a little bit shorter because my coil isn't starting until the front of the piece and it's going long past the bottom. So, just going to clip that off real quick. Okay. And we're going to make a new little hook area. It's a little bit shorter than the last, and reattach it. Okay, then we're going to follow the edge of our weave like we did on the other side. Bring it down to the bottom and bend it over and attach it to the back of the stone, the wrap. Clip. And shove it in there. Okay. Everybody's attached. Everybody's shaped the way we want it to be. Pinching it down, making sure nothing wobbles. Okay, so now we've got this. And you can still kind of see the frame in the back. So from here, you can kind of make a choice. If that's okay with you, then you're done. Your chain will cover what's left. If it's not okay with you, then you can add another element of design to your piece. You can always just keep kind of wiggling things about, see what happens, and go from there. I think that I would like to add, potentially, we'll see how it looks, add a little swirl element to the front of this. To do that, I'm going to cut 2 lengths of, actually one length. Yeah, we'll go with 1 length. 1 length of our 22 gauge, and I'm going to slide it behind my frame, find the middle, and bend them both into shape. Okay. I feel like I should have done this the other direction, so we're going to undo that. As you've probably noticed, I'm kind of making this up as I go along. And by kinda, I mean I'm 100% making this up as I go along. So I started with the middle in the front this time, coiled it around, and now I have the ability to add a swirl using my bail nose pliers because I'm being kind of lazy. And then we can add our swirl down here, and then check out to see if we actually like this element that we've added. We might not. We might. We just never know. We'll find out shortly. Clip. Clip. And it looks like that. I do like that. It's going to help keep my wires from kind of wiggling around up here at the top, which I enjoy that idea as well, and it keeps everybody nice and straight, and I like swirls. So that is that. We've got our stone nice and attached. We've got no sharp pieces. Everybody is secure except for this one. It's always important to go through and check your work. Pretend like it's a math exam, I guess. Go through, check, make sure everything is as secure as you can make it, because you don't want them falling off. Okay, and there you have it. That is the end of this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed it.